This document on internal controls and cash is also located in the Chapter 7 module at our e-learning site, so you can print it off or take notes on it if you'd like to. And I put this document together to try to summarize some of the key ideas from the first two study objectives in the chapter. What are internal controls? What is this all about? As it says at the top of the document, if you have a really tiny company, one person running it, owning it, operating it, you don't really need a sophisticated system of internal controls. But when the company starts growing larger and we need to start delegating duties and responsibilities, how do we know that some of the people in our accounting department, for example, how do we know they're not making errors that are going undetected, or committing fraud and having that slip through the cracks and go undetected? So the purpose of a system of internal controls is to help to safeguard our assets from employee theft and robbery and unauthorized use, and also to ensure accuracy from errors, which are unintentional mistakes, or irregularities, which might be intentional misstatements, usually orchestrated by upper-level management to deceive the public with fraudulent information in the annual report. You'll want to read a little bit about the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. This is discussed in the first study objective in the chapter, and this act came in the wake of a lot of accounting scandals about 15 years ago or so. Enron, for example, and WorldCom and Tyco and Consumers Energy, and wow, the list goes on and on. And the purpose of Sarbanes-Oxley was to tighten up companies' systems of internal controls and to ensure that the outside auditors coming in to do the year-end audit would also be required to report on how effective the company's system of internal controls was. So you'll see a statement from the auditors in every annual report now that addresses whether the company has a sound and effective system of internal controls. In this first couple of sections of the chapter, there are 6 major internal control principles that are discussed. And if you guys go on and take more accounting classes, if you've ever taken an auditing class, probably in your senior year, that is an entire course in internal controls. When the auditors evaluate a company's internal controls, this is the major part of an audit. If we, as auditors, can determine that a company's system is appropriately processing all transactions, that errors aren't going to be slipping through the cracks, then you can greatly reduce the detailed testing of the numbers in the annual report if you have confidence that the company's system is adequately processing transactions. So the 6 basic internal control principles, and you can again read more about these, I think, in section study objective 2 of the book, of this chapter. Establishment of responsibility. Only one person should be responsible for a given task. Examples that I've come up with, I'll just maybe go over the first one here. When you go into a bank, let's say there are a dozen tellers, there are a dozen different teller stations. They are not all working out of the same pot of cash. Each teller is responsible for their own little box of money, and at the end of the day, they are responsible for balancing their box. That way, if one teller is consistently off, then maybe that teller is stealing money, or maybe that teller simply needs to be retrained or put somewhere else in the bank. And it also helps us to be able to find those errors more quickly if we know where to focus our attention in searching for the error. Segregation of duties. I've got a couple of good applications here of segregation of duties. The first application is a very, very sound rule here, that the person at our company who has responsibility for keeping track of the records for an asset should never also have physical access or custody of that asset. In particular, cash, since cash is so desirable and relatively easy to steal if it's lying around, you want to make sure that the person who has access to cash, say you're working in the company's cashier's office, so you're touching money all day long. They should never have access to the accounting records for the cash. It would be far too easy to make a fake journal entry to cover up the theft of cash. Another example of the segregation of duties, this is a little bit longer example, but it's a good one. When a company is purchasing something, whether it's supplies or inventory or equipment or anything else, there's usually a series of people that are involved in a series of documents, beginning with a purchase requisition, which is initiated by someone in authority in our plant or the store or the warehouse who says, hey, we're running low on something, we need to order more. Our purchasing agents will then actually place the order, fill out a purchasing order. When the goods arrive at our receiving dock people will fill out a receiving report stating what has come in, the date, the quantity, and so on. Later, when the invoice comes from the supplier, the invoice will be matched up with all of the preceding documents. We want to make sure that before something is approved for payment, that the bill agrees with what we received, and that agrees with what we ordered, and that agrees with what we said we needed in the first place. So the accounting department will ensure that all those documents are in agreement. Then they'll send the whole bundle to our treasurer's office where a check is written. You can see that this whole process takes more than 5 minutes, and it takes more than one person. So what would happen if you did have just one person who had access to all of these documents? I remember reading in a journal one time about a construction worker. I think this was a Michigan case, and the construction worker had access to all of these documents. And so he decided that he would build himself, I have here a cottage. It's actually, I think, more than a cottage. It was a pretty fancy place up north in the woods somewhere. And he filled out a requisition every time he needed lumber or bricks or shingles or whatever it was. He knew who to order the materials from. He was right down there on the receiving dock to put it into his pickup truck when the goods arrived. He got the invoice from the supplier, and he also was able to write out a company check. So with one person having access to all of this documentation, it allowed him to steal materials from the company for his own personal use. Oddly, I think that in this situation, the worker was uncovered, the fraud was detected. I think he started bragging to the people that he worked with, hey, come on up to my cottage for a fish fry Friday night. So that's how he got caught. But if a company does allow one person access to all these things, they're really kind of setting themselves up for a fraudulent situation. Okay, let's see. Other things that you can read are also indicated here, and I won't go through all of them with you. Let's go on to the third, documentation procedures. All transactions in a company will be documented, as you guys are already aware, in the journal and posted to the ledger and so on. But we need to have supporting evidence behind every transaction. So if we're writing checks, we're going to have our checkbook, and all checks will be pre-numbered so that we can account for them later. If we make sales to customers, we'll keep copies of those sales invoices, and they will be pre-numbered so we can account for all documents later, and it allows us to follow up on questions that might arise in regards to any transactions. The fourth internal control is physical, mechanical, and electronic controls. Something as simple as having a company safe where you're keeping any excess loose money at the end of the day, or having mechanical cash registers as opposed to having money just sitting on the counter somewhere. All of those are examples of physical, mechanical, and electronic controls. And you can read some other examples down here too. Computers that have limited access, alarms in a store to prevent break-ins, or security cameras, garment sensors to deter theft, etc. So lots of physical safeguards that companies can use to protect their assets. Okay, how about the fifth item on the list here, which is independent internal verification. Internal auditors are different from external auditors in that the external auditors come in periodically to perform an audit for a fee. They are not employees of the company they are auditing. They are independent of the company and will present their findings to the company's board of directors. Internal auditors, on the other hand, are employees of the company. So they work year-round to continuously evaluate and improve the company's system of internal control. They're not independent, though. They have a boss at the company. So their findings are not useful for issuing in an annual report. We really need to have independent auditors conducting the annual audit. Other controls that are interesting to read about in your book: bonding. That's a term you should be familiar with, and I bet that many of you are right now or have been bonded. Basically, anybody who has access at a company to cash or other stealable items like jewels in a jewelry store or anything small that could be stolen, those employees are typically bonded, which means the company has taken out an insurance policy in the event that you decide to steal something and run off. So this does nothing at all to prevent theft from taking place, but it does give the company coverage in the event afterwards if theft takes place. Another very good control is rotating employees' duties, and this is really a separate one, requiring vacations. There are lots of reasons for rotating job duties. If a person is being groomed for upper management, for example, they might have that person see a variety of different areas of the company, so they move them around from one place to another as they're working their way up. Another reason for job rotation is simply to alleviate boredom. If one person is in a particular job for years and years, they get tired and want to see something new. But another very important for job rotation, another reason, is to prevent collusion among two people or more. So say you had one person working in the cashier's office at a company and another person working in accounts receivable, recording money coming in from customers. What if those two people got to be really friendly? And over the years they decided, hey, if we get together, we could rip off the company. So I'll steal money. I'm in the cashier's office, and you make a fake journal entry into the customer's accounts. And then Saturday night, we'll split the money together. Well, before people start to get to know each other too well and start hatching these schemes to rip off the company, one of them will be rotated to another part of the company. Darn, there goes our plan. So that's actually a big reason for job rotation. Requiring employees to take vacations. You might think, well, why would they need to force me to take a vacation? But believe it or not, there are people that maybe have been in their position for a long time and they really don't want to take a vacation. I remember reading several situations of this nature related to bankers. I remember one in particular, a bank in Saginaw, where the teller had been forced to take a vacation. She hadn't been on a vacation in years. And when someone stepped in to take her place, it's like, oh my gosh, she'd been slowly ripping off the bank for several $100,000 over the last 20 years, and nobody knew. So when someone comes in and takes your spot and looks at what you've been doing, some of these frauds and thefts have come to light. And there are some other warning signals here that you might want to read about that I've got listed, and lots of good information in the first couple of sections of Chapter 7.